I stared at the screen in disbelief as my signature, 3 years of work, 20,000 lines of code, and the trust of 17 states, vanished in real time. Grant Lyle smiled like he'd just rewritten history. The humiliation was quiet, surgical, deliberate. My name deleted, his inserted, seconds before the federal oversight upload. He thought it was over, that I was powerless, but he didn't know what those systems were built on, or whose hands had designed every safeguard he just violated. Some truths don't vanish when erased. They wait. Before I continue, tell me, have you ever seen a betrayal this calculated? Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe for the full story. The cursor blinked twice, then my name vanished. One keystroke, and 3 years of federal compliance work disappeared from the report. There, Grant Lyle said, leaning over my shoulder, his breath heavy with cheap cologne and confidence. Now it looks cleaner. Cleaner. That's what he called deleting my signature block, the federally registered credential that verified every safety record in our multi-state grid system. I watched the new header appear. Submitted by Grant Lyle, Vice President of Operations. My initials were gone, scrubbed like they'd never existed. My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice even. You realize that's a federal submission, I said. My name was on that report for a reason. He smirked. You should be thanking me. I just saved you from the stress of tomorrow's audit. He tapped send before I could move. The upload confirmation flashed green, sealing my erasure in real time. The silence in the room pressed against my ribs. The 2 analysts sitting nearby stared at their monitors, pretending not to notice. They knew what it meant to challenge him. I could feel the burn rising behind my eyes, the kind that demanded you either scream or stay silent forever. I chose silence, for now. Grant straightened his tie, already rehearsing his talking points for the morning's press call. He had no idea what he'd just done. That one falsified upload wasn't just theft, it was ignition. The system he'd just hijacked didn't forgive lies. It corrected them. Grant thought the compliance system was a spreadsheet with pretty formatting and color-coded cells. He never understood that what I built beneath it was a living structure, a network designed to verify truth itself. 3 years ago, when the Department of Energy began digitizing its regional oversight, I was tasked to design a submission platform that could self-audit in real time. Everyone wanted speed, not accuracy. But I'd seen what rushed compliance could destroy: one falsified metric, one unchecked report, and people could die in the dark. So I built something they didn't ask for: a silent witness inside every upload. Every file that entered the National Energy Database carried a digital watermark tied to its true author. Each keystroke left a traceable pattern: time, location, authentication key, and a checksum that could only be validated by my original encryption signature. It wasn't about ownership, it was about accountability. I called it the Federal Safeguard Key, and it did one thing perfectly: it protected truth from politics. On the surface, it looked like a routine verification process. Underneath, it was an algorithm wired to detect manipulation. If falsified data ever entered the chain, it didn't just flag it. It isolated it, revoked every associated operating license, and froze the submission authority responsible. No one outside my core design team knew it existed, and that's how it had to stay. Too many executives thought compliance was paperwork instead of infrastructure. I didn't need them to understand it. I needed it to work. Now, as Grant's falsified report pulsed through the federal servers, that hidden layer came alive. Every checksum, every timestamp, every validation ping was screaming the same message: this submission wasn't authentic. But the system wouldn't raise an alert just yet. It was designed to verify patterns over time, not individual mistakes. It would wait, quietly analyzing, cross-referencing, confirming the breach. I'd seen it work before in simulation. The moment it finished verification, every operational license tied to that corrupted submission would auto-lock. I sat back in my chair, letting the hum of the servers fill the silence. The system wasn't mine anymore. It was the country's, written into law, monitored by machines that didn't play favorites. Grant thought he'd rewritten my legacy. What he didn't know was that the Foundation itself refused to accept a lie. I didn't sleep that night. The audit report was live, and my name was nowhere in the federal database. Every click of my mouse felt like tracing the outline of my own disappearance. But panic wasn't an option. I'd built this system, and if there was one thing I trusted, it was the permanence of digital footprints. So I started pulling them. The internal access logs were precise down to the millisecond. I watched the timeline unfold in reverse. My last authenticated edit at 10:43 p.m., followed by Grant's override at 11:02. His IP pinging from his corner office, his credentials flagged as elevated access. Every deletion, every substitution, every upload, all stamped, time-synced, and logged under his ID. I exported everything, JSON data, system metadata, network handshakes, and compiled it into a private folder encrypted under a personal security key. No one could alter these logs without tripping the same failsafe Grant had already set in motion. As I sifted through the traces, I saw the arrogance written in the details. He hadn't even masked his activity. He'd renamed my original file Draft Prelim Tessa v7 into Final Grant v1, leaving the version history intact. That was the thing about people like Grant. They thought visibility equaled control. They never understood that visibility cuts both ways. I saved screenshots, message traces, and server logs to 3 independent cloud vaults. Then I sent a single encrypted email to my personal address. Subject line: if I disappear, check version history. It wasn't drama, it was insurance. By dawn, news of Grant's brilliant compliance overhaul spread through internal channels. The executives flooded his inbox with praise. The board chair even wrote, "Your leadership sets the new standard for our industry." My phone stayed silent, not a single acknowledgement. And yet, I didn't feel rage anymore, just focus, the kind that comes when you know time is about to do your work for you. Around mid-morning, the first anomalies appeared in the monitoring dashboard. I noticed subtle discrepancies between the uploaded report and the live regulatory feed. Mismatched checksums, unverified license IDs, data inconsistencies multiplying by the minute. Grant probably thought those were server delays. They weren't. The system was reconciling my original encrypted key against his falsified one, and failing to validate his. That process, once complete, would trigger the automatic integrity lock. I didn't need to touch a thing. My part was done months ago when I hard-coded those parameters. What he called paranoia, I called architecture. What he dismissed as unnecessary redundancy was now quietly building a federal case file against him. I minimized the window and stared at the reflection on my dark screen. My eyes looked calmer than I expected. Maybe this was what power really felt like. Not shouting, not revenge fantasies, just the knowledge that every lie has a half-life. Around noon, I copied the logs to an external drive, slipped it into my coat pocket, and left the office without saying a word. As I walked through the glass doors, I passed Grant surrounded by department heads, laughing, promising a new era of compliance excellence. He saw me for half a second and smirked. I didn't return it. He'd already signed his name onto a document that would erase him from every system that mattered. By the next afternoon, the first alert hit the internal network, an amber notification flashing across the top of every terminal. Integrity verification pending. Do not modify active records. Most employees ignored it, assuming it was another compliance update. I didn't. I knew the system was beginning its silent interrogation, comparing Grant's falsified upload to the original authentic sequence. Once it completed, the federal safeguard key would initiate its cascade, automatic suspension of every operational license tied to the corrupted data chain. It wouldn't explode all at once. It would bleed out methodically, file by file, state by state. That's how truth works. It doesn't need noise. It erodes quietly until what's left standing is undeniable. Grant was in meetings all morning, pitching his new compliance model to upper management. I watched through the glass wall as he gestured with his hands like a politician, his smile too wide for the room. Every minute he talked, the clock on the server log ticked closer to validation. At exactly 1:14 p.m., the system reached 98%. I could feel it. The air around my desk went still. The final checksum cycle engaged, and the moment it completed, every facility tied to that report would lose its compliance clearance. No clearance meant no legal authority to operate. 17 states, hundreds of substations, billions of dollars. I sat back, hands folded, and waited. 1:17 p.m. Completion. The screen blinked red for a single second, then flashed white, signaling lockout. Across the operations floor, phones started ringing. Someone cursed from 3 desks away. "Is your portal down?" another voice shouted. On the executive floor, the lights dimmed for a brief moment, a power management surge. My inbox filled with automatic notifications. Integrity lock activated, license revocation in progress. The dominoes were falling, perfectly synchronized. Downstairs, Grant's voice echoed through the glass, louder now, no longer the confident cadence of a man in control, but the strained pitch of someone trying to outrun inevitability. He barked at IT, demanded rollbacks, threatened to escalate to federal support. But the system wasn't under his command. It was under the Department of Energy's jurisdiction now. Every attempt to override triggered another layer of protection. He'd have better luck shouting at gravity. My phone buzzed with a message from an old colleague still in the operations division. "What's happening? Licenses showing suspended. Grant's losing it." I typed back one line. "It's the safeguard key doing its job." Then I powered off my phone. Let the system speak. Outside, media alerts began surfacing on energy market channels. Regional outage pending regulatory suspension. Traders panicked, shorting stock faster than the company could issue statements. Within 2 hours, the board called an emergency session. Grant tried to project calm, insisting it was a temporary data validation issue. The irony was almost poetic. He used my own words, the same language I'd written in the safeguard manual he'd deleted my name from. Only now, those same words were in the alert's warning of his downfall. Around 3 p.m., the federal liaison contacted the company directly. The system had detected falsified authorship on the most recent submission. All associated credentials, specifically those under Grant's ID, were locked pending investigation. His face went pale. I could see it even from across the floor. Every access badge tied to his name went inactive simultaneously. The servers recognized him as a contamination source. He tried to argue, but the liaison had no interest in theatrics. "This isn't optional," she said flatly. "Your authorization is revoked under federal code." The room fell silent. He looked around for help, but no one spoke. Not the analysts, not the directors, not even the assistants who used to laugh at his jokes. In the corner, I stood quietly, unseen behind the tinted glass, watching the man who had erased my name watch his own vanish from the system. For a brief moment, his eyes met mine through the reflection. He didn't blink. Neither did I. By the next morning, the grid wasn't just unstable, it was paralyzed. State regulators had forced a full suspension of operations until the investigation cleared. Hundreds of facilities went offline, not from a power failure but from paperwork. a digital silence more devastating than any blackout. News anchors filled the screens in the lobby. Energy conglomerate faces federal freeze after compliance breach. The company's logo glowed faintly behind the anchor's head, flickering like a dying light. I sat in my office, the one Grant had promised to repurpose for his executive expansion, and listened to the panic echo through the corridors. Phones rang in loops, emails multiplied by the second, subject lines screaming, urgent, client termination, clause, license, void, shareholder crisis. By noon, the company's market cap had fallen by a third. Investors demanded answers, but the answers kept pointing in one direction: Grant Lyle's login credentials. The audit trail that I'd quietly archived now lived in federal hands. They were connecting the dots: the falsified submission, the removed signature, the unauthorized upload sequence. His name wasn't just on the paperwork anymore. It was burned into every record of failure. I watched the chaos from the mezzanine, the same glass rail I'd leaned on the night he deleted my name. People moved below like ants under floodlights, directionless, frightened. Grant was at the center of it, pacing, shouting into a phone that wasn't connecting to anyone who could help him. I wondered if he finally understood what he'd triggered, that his ambition had transformed from asset to evidence. Around 2 p.m., the board held a closed-door meeting with the Department of Energy's Oversight Division. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. The outcome was inevitable. When you lie to a federal system built to detect lies, the only question left is how long it takes to collapse. An hour later, Grant emerged from the conference room, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The press was already outside the building, microphones ready. His carefully pressed suit looked out of place under the fluorescent lights, like armor that no longer fit. The internal memo hit inboxes seconds later. Effective immediately, Vice President of Operations Grant Lyle is relieved of duty pending federal investigation. The subject line alone was enough to freeze the building. Everyone stopped pretending this was fixable. HR escorted him toward the elevator, but the lobby doors were already lined with cameras. He tried to wave them off, saying it was a temporary transition, but the questions came fast. Did you falsify compliance reports? Are federal regulators revoking your licenses? Did you delete your colleague's name before the audit? Each denial sounded thinner than the last. He disappeared behind a wall of flashes. The next notification arrived at 4:36 p.m. The Department of Energy had issued an official statement confirming suspension of the company's grid operations pending reauthorization under new leadership. Translation: we were done until proven innocent. The silence that followed wasn't just corporate, it was existential. Departments went dark. Partner companies severed ties. By evening, employees were packing boxes. A few stopped by my door, half whispering their condolences, half asking if I knew what happened. I gave them the same calm answer every time. The system protected itself. They didn't understand it, but they nodded like people who sensed something larger than luck. On my screen, I opened the National Regulatory Portal. The report that had once carried Grant's name now displayed an empty field where the author ID should be. Underneath, a new tag blinked: original verification pending. The checksum of my encrypted signature, my invisible fingerprint, was already reasserting itself through the database, rewriting history with truth. I leaned back, listening to the low hum of servers resetting across the building. Justice didn't always arrive with sirens or headlines. Sometimes it arrived as silence, systems realigning, protocols correcting, the universe balancing itself line by line of code. Outside, night fell over the city, a faint orange glow washing across the horizon. Somewhere out there, thousands of homes flickered back to life as regulators authorized temporary reroutes. Order was returning, but not to this building. This place would stay dark for a while, and maybe that was fitting. Truth had reclaimed the grid, and the man who tried to steal it was now the reason it shut down. The hearing was held in a federal conference room that looked more like a courtroom disguised in glass. Cameras were banned, but the weight of exposure filled every inch of air. Grant sat 3 seats away from me, his once smooth confidence fractured into restless movements. He adjusted his tie every 30 seconds, checking the folder in front of him, even though it contained nothing that could save him. Across the table sat the Department of Energy's oversight panel, 3 regulators, 1 federal investigator, and the board's legal counsel. The lead auditor began by reading the preliminary findings: unauthorized access, falsified authorship, and submission under revoked verification key. Each word cut through the room like precision machinery. I didn't need to say anything yet. My work was already speaking for me. The investigator turned to Grant first. "Mr. Lyle, can you explain the origin of this submission?" His voice caught. "It's the company's standard protocol. I supervise the report as acting compliance liaison." The auditor didn't blink. "Supervised or submitted?" Grant hesitated, eyes darting toward me for the first time. The investigator caught the glance. "Ms. Monroe, please confirm. Did you design this compliance architecture?" I nodded once. "Yes. Every encryption layer, every checksum, every federal safeguard key." The regulator leaned forward. "Then explain to us why this system identifies your signature as the original author, yet flags his credentials as forged." My hands didn't shake when I opened my laptop. The large screen behind the panel mirrored my display. "Because the system doesn't care about names," I said. "It authenticates integrity. Every verified report carries a unique digital watermark created by the author's encryption key. When Mr. Lyle deleted my name, he also deleted his own authority to authenticate it. The system treated his upload as a contamination event." The live monitor showed the data map expanding, a blue network of nodes glowing in sequence, each one labeled T. Monroe, verified. The red nodes beside them, G, Lyle, Invalid, flashed faster with every recalibration cycle. The silence was so complete you could hear the cooling fans from the servers behind the wall. Grant tried to interject. "That display's been manipulated. She's controlling the visuals." The investigator cut him off. "No, she's not. This feed is direct from the department system. It's real-time verification." Then came the sound no executive ever forgets, the alert ping. The panel's monitor displayed a full confirmation overlay. Original author, Monroe, Tessa. Unauthorized edit detected, Lyle, Grant. Integrity lock, active. Every federal officer in the room now had the same message mirrored on their tablets. The regulator spoke slowly, deliberately. "Mr. Lyle, your credentials have been permanently revoked pending criminal review for falsification of federal data. You are hereby removed from all operational access." His face collapsed in slow motion, color draining until only disbelief remained. "You don't understand," he said, voice cracking. "This will ruin me." The investigator didn't look up. "It already has." He turned to me next. "Ms. Monroe, the system you built prevented a catastrophic oversight. Your protocols will be adopted for future federal compliance frameworks. You've done this department a service." I felt the words settle deep in my chest. No applause, no cinematic victory, just quiet validation that truth, once verified, could not be erased. Grant slumped back, staring at the live screen as his access privileges disappeared one by one. The man who had deleted my name was now watching his own vanish in real time, stripped from the very infrastructure he thought he controlled. When the hearing adjourned, I gathered my files and stood. As I passed him, he whispered, "You set me up." I didn't stop walking. "No," I said, "you deleted yourself." 3 months later, I unlocked the glass door of my new office and stared at the name etched across it. Monroe Integrity Systems. The letters looked simple, almost quiet, but they carried everything I'd fought for: authorship, ownership, truth. The air smelled faintly of new paint and coffee from the cafe downstairs. I'd signed contracts with 3 state energy commissions, 2 independent grid operators, and 1 federal agency in less than 8 weeks. They didn't need a pitch deck or a marketing plan. They'd seen what happened when integrity wasn't optional. My consultancy was built on the same principle that had saved the grid: transparency wired into every line of code. I hired small, precise teams, people who'd been ignored or overlooked by executives who preferred shortcuts. We rebuilt systems meant to outlast ego. Late at night, I'd sit by the window, city lights pulsing below, and think about how silence had been my greatest weapon. I hadn't needed revenge. I just needed the truth to finish what it started. One afternoon, an envelope arrived with the seal of the U.S. Department of Energy. Inside was a formal citation, framed in brushed steel. Integrity is the strongest infrastructure. No signature, no note. Just acknowledgement, clean and final. I placed it on the shelf behind my desk, not as decoration, but as a reminder that the system had remembered. Word traveled about Grant. After the hearing, he'd tried to secure consulting work, but no one wanted to risk association. Every background check surfaced the same phrase: falsified federal data, credentials revoked. In an industry built on compliance, that was a career death sentence. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. Justice wasn't a scene. It was a structure, one that stays upright long after the noise fades. As the sun set across the skyline, light caught the edge of that silver frame, and for the first time in years, I exhaled. The system had done exactly what it was designed to do. It protected what was true, even from those who tried to destroy it. And that was enough. 2 months after the citation arrived, I was in a meeting with a new client when HR forwarded a candidate profile for a senior compliance role. The name stopped me cold: Grant Lyle. The resume was immaculate, scrubbed clean of scandal, but the internet never forgets. His credentials still carried the digital scar of revocation, a permanent shadow on every verification check. The CEO noticed my silence and raised an eyebrow. "You know him?" I nodded once. "I know his work." That was all I said. The application was withdrawn quietly the next day. A week later, the CEO left a small box on my desk. Inside was a polished plaque engraved with 6 words: "Truth doesn't need permission to survive." I smiled, tracing the metal with my fingertip. Some lessons don't echo. They hum beneath the surface, steady and unbreakable, just like the systems built to protect them. When Grant deleted my name, it wasn't just a theft of credit. It was a test of design. Every hour I'd spent documenting, encrypting, and verifying my work became the quiet armor I didn't know I'd need. Revenge didn't come from rage, it came from structure. I learned that real power in the workplace doesn't shout. It waits, built into the systems that arrogant people assume they control. What Grant called paranoia was simply discipline. What he dismissed as extra steps was the very framework that buried his career. In American offices, shortcuts are often celebrated as brilliance. But what no one talks about is how fragile that brilliance becomes when it's built on deceit. My safeguards weren't just technical. They were moral boundaries encoded in code. When he falsified my report, he triggered accountability, not vengeance. And in that moment, I realized something simple but permanent. Integrity is leverage. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need a headline to win. In today's workplace, where speed outruns truth, documenting your process is not bureaucracy. It's survival. I want people who've been dismissed or undermined to feel this truth. Preparation is not weakness, it's strategy. Build systems that don't rely on anyone's honesty but your own. Let your structure protect your silence. How to get started today. Keep a personal record of your work, Emails, design versions, timestamps. They're not paranoia, they're protection. Embed traceability into every major task or document you own. Never rush validation. Truth deserves precision, not speed. Design your systems so that if someone removes you, your integrity remains. Before you go, what would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts below, share this story, and subscribe for more truths hidden inside corporate revenge.